Ben Riggs presents D&D Out Loud. Episode 110, Exploring Middle-earth.
Welcome once again, assembled internet hordes, to D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. I am Ben Riggs, apparently controversial D&D historian and author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the past 13 years of writing and podcasting, I have met hundreds of creative geniuses in and around the world of tabletop role-playing games here on this show. I ask a few of these flaming torches of the imagination to come forth and have a fascinating discussion, which I then record and send out into the world. First up today, we welcome back for our possibly most frequently occurring guest, Josh McCrowell, designer of His Majesty the Worm. He won Ennies last year for Best Game and Best System. Josh, I feel like I can't say too much and can't say enough at the same time. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm practically a co-host at this point.
Yeah. The person that requested Josh is Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan, who, again, has been very a personally significant designer for me. It may be, he may be the designer I've run the most stuff of, like, in my life, like, thinking about it. Because I ran Dracula Dossier twice, and I spent a year running the One Ring, and that's a lot of time at the table with Gareth's work. It's difficult to describe both his writing ability, which is both succinct and fascinating, and also his imagination, which is both wide and deep. And Gareth has written seas of material that I haven't even touched. Like, I keep hearing Pirates of Drinax is like, when people are like, best. I think you might have two campaigns when people on Reddit are like, so, okay, everybody, what's the best campaign of all time? Dracula Dossier and Pirates of Drinax are brought up regularly. Eyes of the Stone Thief a little less so, but you may also be the most frequently occurring designer on those lists. So, welcome, Gareth, and I'm going to launch in with, why did you want to talk to Josh?
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, which is absurdly generous, and hi to Josh. I think mainly you said, like, let's talk about the Saruman book we want to talk to, and actually there's a bit in the, actually, just for context, Hands of the White Wizard is the supplement most recent supplement for the One Ring. It's this campaign where you're basically playing adventures working for Saruman. There's a mechanic in there where his shadow goes up and down, and you can, depending on how the campaign is set up and the choice of your GM, decide whether you could, like, save Saruman at the end, adjust the degree to which he falls, or you can stay locked into the canonical. He looks to the Palantir and gets trucked to the year 2000. Anyway, there was a sidebar in there which got cut during editing, where I was talking about different ways to approach Middle-earth, what different groups want out of Middle-earth. And I there's some people who want, they want to play small-scale adventurers in Middle-earth, or they're brief folk or hobbits. They go off on small little adventures, come back home. They want to basically, they're having adventures over in the background of the stories. Then there are people who want to play, slightly more large-scale adventures, or do something like this in the books. And in those, there are people who want to either have large-scale adventures that still leave the canon unchanged. So basically, you can go off against Slade's Monster, which isn't mentioned in the books, but it fits in with the story. And then there are people who want to basically use the canon as a starting point and charge off, and are willing to save Saruman and explore altered versions of Middle-earth. And I've been reading your Middle-earth hex crawl blog posts, and it's interesting because with the One Ring being the official licensed game and so forth, we're trying to like be all things to all people and sort of support every possible approach, but I'm trying to like cast it
Yes.
as wide as possible. Whereas you
Yeah.
got the luxury of being able to sort of do Middle Earth the way you'd prefer.
Yeah, it's a. I
I'm
was
sorry.
I was
Can
thinking
I
about that
interrupt?
contrast.
I'm sorry, Josh. Can you tell us about your Middle Earth hex crawl that has apparently seduced Gareth on the call with us?
Oh, sure. It's on my blog. I have a daily writing project that I started last year. There's another blog called Luna Archives, who put out a hex map of Middle Earth. The yeoman's work of capturing, using hexagraphing software to make a hex map of Middle Earth, and it's Middle Earth is a big place, and they noted that most of the points of interest were in the Shire because we have a lot of Shire content, and they're like the rest of it is very empty. And I thought, I wonder if I suspect that's not true, right? Like, I mean, I suspect there's lots of other stuff there. We just don't know what it is yet. And as a daily writing exercise, I started filling it out. I read the books, the trilogy, about once a year. I have done for a very long time, and often that makes me think about how to gamify the stuff that I'm reading. And during last year's reread, I started this, and I'd write a hex a day, and it's not a hex. The hexes that I write are probably too long for some real hex sickos out there that want extremely short terse hexes. But I have done it since, and despite that, despite my self-regulation and like feeling that I'm doing a really good job of chipping it away, it's amazing how much Middle Earth is left after having done it for half a year. It is a big place. So that is what my Middle Earth hex crawl. It's just on my blog. It's a little writing project for myself. But you were saying, Gareth, that like the One Ring has to be, it has to fit these different modes for different people. And what did you finish articulating that?
I mean, well, that paragraph was, or that the sidebar was cut from the book. So, but no, it's just that, like, there are. I mean, Tolkien himself is a fascinating writer. Just he crams so much stuff into the books, like, and they're to a large degree you got that. I'm not phrasing this at all well. You've got The Hobbit, which is tonally relatively consistent from beginning to end. Whereas Lord of the Rings crams everything from these, like, we've got the Hobbit through the early chapters. You've got this much sort of like, King Solomon's Mines, adventure fiction, Moria. It gets positively biblical, and once you get to Minas Tirith, you've got the Beowulf pastiche of Rohan, and then the appendices are this fantastic sort of like found manuscript. Tolkien having good, hilarious academic fun with himself, writing up the
yes,
endless genealogies and so forth. There are so many facets to Middle Earth. It's really interesting to try and game for that, because you either focus on one or try and dance between them, and sort of cram everything in and try and work out what the most appropriate facet is, particular either style of game or section of book or plot element you're dropping in. When you're doing actually, one question that always haunted me about Middle Earth, or haunted's the wrong word, but fascinated me, is how weird is it?
Yes.
Because you've got Bilbo and Frodo's journeys, and they encounter lots of weirdness no matter where they go. Basically, you've got Bilbo steps out of his house, and he's got trolls with a talking purse. He travels a bit on, he gets to Rivendell, where they're elves singing at him. Over the mountains, Goblin City, blah blah blah. And Frodo similarly strolls off, runs into the Old Forest, and Tom Bombadil. That's a vast amount of weirdness, and a very, very small hex right there.
Yes.
But then the actual framing story and the histories of the appendices and so forth, it's just a much more mundane world. You've got like the history of Arnor and Gondor don't go, oh, and then this dragon flew down and laid waste the city, or have any other than very vague references, have very little supernatural stuff at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so my question has always been, do you think that there's very little sort of supernatural stuff or strange stuff out there, and just because of the story they happen to hit all the sort of weirdness along the way, or is there weirdness sort of under every rock, and it's just that Tolkien didn't include that in the appendices and histories because that wasn't the particular type of fun he was having when he was writing those sections?
No, I have a strong sense. It's the latter. It's that if these snapshots where you get the focus of and the perspective of these perspective characters, and he jumps around from perspective characters a little bit, from Bilbo to Frodo to Sam, and sometimes the other hobbits. If these people get weird stuff, then that is what is reflective everywhere. If you had that level of like boots on the ground, if you're not talking about long histories, I think this is true that Tolkien still has a credit in the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, of inventing the word hobbit, although there is an earlier instance in this folklore tract called the Denham Tracts.
Yeah. And I found there's also a archaic measure of weight called a hobbit for grain, apparently.
Okay, well, leaving aside the archaic weight and just thinking about fantasy creatures.
Yeah.
There's in the Denham Tracts, there's this long list of like English words that mean like spirit,
hobgoblin,
goblin, it lists it for a page. It's a chunk of hobbits in that. And but the greater point on that page was that there is no crossroads, no boulder, no chapel, no country lane that didn't have its bogey to, like, if you traveled through, walked around England, every piece of landscape and human habitation had some spook that had, that lived there. And I feel like that's probably true for Middle Earth too, right? Like, if elves and dwarves and dragons exist, then like those country lanes are haunted. Those boulders do have a guardian. I think that's made manifest in Middle Earth, right?
Yeah, I'm very quite sure with that, because you've got English built superstitions. That's fine, but in Middle Earth, and also in a role playing game, you can go down the road, you can meet Tom Bombadil, or you can meet the goblin. The goblin might drag you off to their goblin cave, but there's they're not just stories, they're actual creatures in the world. You can go, you can interact with them, they'll impact on things beyond them. So if the world, if every crossroads has its goblin, its troll, its Tom Bombadil, its ghost, its Black Rider, whatever, then things are going to get very, very crowded, and it's hard to keep the idea of the Shire as this relatively mundane, relatively safe area, or in Bree, they talk about they're trolls and strange things off up that way, but you've got the Rangers keeping things would freeze your blood out from Bree. Right. Are we saying that the Rangers are spending their whole time basically battling monsters, or is battling monsters a rare thing?
Well, I mean, some of these things don't have to be, are probably interesting, I think, for players to uncover, but somewhat mundane for the people themselves. And then not everything has to be dangerous. They could just be interesting encounters and interesting people to talk to. And if like a fox could see the hobbits and think like, oh, that's weird. What's his deal? Where did he go home, and what's his wife? I feel like there's little things sort of anywhere, I would imagine, that would make no matter which like direction you took out of Bree, if you walked in any of the cardinal directions, you'd find something equally as interesting as the stuff that our characters found. But don't you think of that, right? Like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really about density. Like, are they encountering something weird? Like, basically, not like this every hex, but like, every.
Yes.
Like how much weird stuff is out there versus how much is just like, mile after mile of empty Eriador.
Yes.
Because one thing I've found when writing Tolkien material is that it's very, very hard to get the tone right. That like that creating anything new runs into the risk of just breaking that very, very distinct, like steeped in folklore and history, but also like so wonderfully embedded in the world. Like like you can sort of say, like, they're like historical antecedents for Tom Bombadil or whatever. But if you drop a Jack in the Green in every wood,
right,
then you just like it just doesn't work. And like, for example, in one of the supplements for the first edition of the One Ring, I went, okay, we need like it needs new monsters. I'll throw in basilisks, and I hated myself for doing so because they just didn't fit with Middle Earth. And while they were a great challenge for the players, because like paralysis effects, and like we have to like can't be seeing this monster, we've got like come up with a creative way to get around it. That's interesting in the game. It just broke the Tolkien mood.
I think the same thing happens in and this is just my experience in playing Middle Earth games, which I've done, which my friends have like indulged me for many years when I was in middle school and high school and today. I think most official Lord of the Rings RPG splats have some adaptation for things that feel very one-off, like the Watcher in the Water. They're like, okay, we know these exist, so like if you go up north in the Pelennor quest in the Merp books, like
look, it's his cousin.
That's his friend, like in the same way, some things that were like these mysterious one-offs, when created into types and made into a monster entry, also like similarly lose their magic, right? Like in some ways you can't have it either way. There's these dangers both paths.
I mean, strangely, Tolkien gets away with that, exactly that. He goes, "Oh, there's a giant spider that ate the world, and here's her daughter
and her friend." Yeah, yeah, totally.
but it works for him. Partly, I think, just because he's so good at naming things, which is drives you up the wall. Like I at this point, I've got so many books on like old English names and bestiaries and so forth, trying to find like the one that fits. Like one of my single proudest moment of anything I've written for the One Ring was finding in John Garth's Tolkien the Great War. He had these early names for Ungoliant, and I stole them and stuck them for the spiders in Darkney Mirkwood because they have new Tolkien names that fit. Great.
Yeah, I mean, he cared so much about the sound, like the poetic sounds of the in all of his History of Middle-earth books, as he. And I know that you know this because I've enjoyed your threads on this subject. He picks up and puts down names and reuses them. And this elf is called this, and then no, that's his father, and then it's this again. And how many times did Frodo almost become Falco? And like,
oh yeah,
you have
that's better than Bingo.
It's better than Bingo, which was draft 1. But yeah, he left a lot of names. He obviously cared about it because he would cross it out and rewrite it in all of his successive drafts. So yeah, there is a lot of material there to pull from, which I think the One Ring has done, right? Like there's a Hobbit pre-made character in the first edition called Trotter, a character from the History of Middle Earth that got left on the cutting room floor.
Indeed. I mean, one of my rules when writing is that I have to trace everything back to Tolkien somehow, either from something he's written or as like to echo like a concept he's done. Like, for example, there's one adventure I did, which is basically a take on Turin Turnbar. Obviously, we can't do Turin directly because of the whole shenanigans of the license and like the whole that that whole thing. But I can sort of like take the concept of here is this, troubled warrior who's very good at killing things, but has this complicated personal life. I can basically take that concept, transplant it into the Third Age. Hogan's great.
I mean, that's another advantage that I have
Yeah.
just writing as in my fan based projects. I can dip my brush into all sorts of stuff, especially because as a daily writing project and not as a commercial project, like my ability to be more playful and find the stuff that works by kind of throwing stuff at the wall that if I there's a lot of stuff that if I was going to take it and recodify it in some different way and reuse those ideas into a different type of hex map for a different project, there's a lot of stuff that I would leave at the table just because my needs for writing stuff for my players is very different than one's needs, either of us needs, for writing something for publication.
Of course. Out of curiosity, when you're doing stuff for your players, what level of notes are you doing?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of a lot of my publications are somewhat maximalist. I write, I tend to write a lot because I tend to need a lot of support myself. I'm always telling people that they don't need to do that. That to get something written for them to run on a Friday night is a lot easier than trying to get somebody else to read something and understand it. But I tend to be somewhat overwrought in my personal writing. And a lot of the stuff that I published more or less looks like the stuff that I'm using at the table. But, like a Google Doc. What about yourself?
Yeah. See, I started out, my sort of first publications were doing convention scenarios. Basically, it's local convention had the system where basically one person wrote the scenario and lost tables run it. So my writing is still very much informed by going, okay, here's the plot. I need to basically run it. I need to give people multiple GMs with different styles the tools they'll need. So here's lots of stuff that might be useful. But when it actually comes to my own stuff, I tend to be 2 lines in the back of an envelope, make it up as I go along. I'm actually far more interested these days in capturing stuff after the session than doing prep before, because I'm very, very good at doing these elaborate, intricate plots on the fly in the moment. And then 2 weeks later, I'll be oh, there was that guy who was really important. And I have this note here that orange gem means something. I have no idea what I was talking about at the time.
Yes. So I have a very similar problem where my ability to sort of self-report what happened even a week later is very, very bad. So which is why a very mean GM, I make my players take notes, and a lot of people are well, you just remind. I'm I don't know, because if you don't take the note that is gone from me. And something that I think that Yokai Gall does, or at least in my conversations with him, he wrote Cairn, and the way that I think he does a lot of immediate after the session writing instead of session prep writing. He does post session writing to update his notes and create notes about what happened, and he needs to do that night, and if he waits the next day, it's gone for him as well, which is exactly how it works for me, except I'm too lazy to write it down that night. So
yeah, I've started sending my players a WhatsApp message basically going, here's what you just did, straight after the game. Did I see in His Majesty the Worm, which I just finished reading there last night, that there's a one player recaps the session and they get bonus XP if they do it or something?
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, it's exactly, they get to charge a bond, which is one of the resource, within a character's resources. And that's, I mean, I am very, the care that you have taken to write different works to work for many different people is very admirable. His Majesty the Worm is an essay on how I run games, what it looks like to play a game with me, and that's what I do. At the beginning of the session, it's very formalized. Who took notes? Who would like to recap? Thank you. Charge a bond. That is part of my practice. And that book is written for me. It's hey, if you're kind of interested in the games that I like to run, this is what they look like. my day job as a technical writer, I have to think more about user profiles and user journey mapping and making this work for everybody in a way that I'm very callous about when I get to my hobby writing, which is I'm making a game for me and my friends, and I've done the extra effort to give you my notes as well if you would like to see them. But yeah, I do it in a very formal way, just to have a session recap at the beginning of everything. And now that I've just recently stepped out of the GM's chair and let somebody else I get the benefit of somebody else running His Majesty the Worm and our weekly game, which has been going on for years and years, 8 or 9 years at this point. And I have to take really detailed notes, and I'm filling up notebooks to be on the other side of this and like make sure that I'm understanding the connections and everything that's happening and who the NPCs are. Which is fun. I like being I like being obliged to pay attention. It makes me feel engaged.
Is it strange having someone else run your game for you?
A little.
Yeah.
I worry that if you let me, I would intrude and like give them like, rules advice, or like, oh, this is how I would handle this rule question, or I would remind them too often about like what the intention was. But I also feel very strongly that now that I wrote the book, and because my memory is very bad, we are running the game from the same source material. So like, I don't have any authority here. I want to be helpful if I can be, but otherwise I'm really hoping that I can shut up and get out of the way, because the current GM has every much as right to like take the stuff that he likes and cut the stuff that he doesn't, because he's running the game, and I get to benefit from that. So I'm worried that if it's weird only because I get into my head about if I'm being a jerk player or not, and I really don't want to be. He's doing a great job. I'm having a blast. Yeah. So in terms of fun quotient, it's off the charts.
It's interesting, if you're like, I've like written games and had people run them for me, but they've always been like either licensed things or like I did like the Unit of Traveller. So like, Traveller is not my game. I did a version of it, but there's still like, levels of history to it. So I don't say it's ownership. But with your case, like, this is like very your game written your way, and someone else running. Just an interesting experience, I'm sure.
Yes.
So, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Please.
So Tolkien in On Fairy Stories, I've been spending a lot of time with On Fairy Stories recently. It's been very illuminating, and he says that fantasy is possibly the most difficult form of art, and therefore the most rewarding. And I thought that was really interesting, because I think that the reputation of fantasy now is, it's like, pablum for the masses in some way, right? Fantasy writing is looked down upon. It's probably all, I'm rambling off now, but like, I would say, what do you guys have to say about that tension? The fact that the popularizer of 20th century fantasy was like, look, it's really hard to do well, and if you do it well, it's a fantastic form of art. And yet, of course, the reputation of fantasy is the opposite of that.
He should have tried writing RPG modules. That's the hardest form of art, Tolkien.
If they had existed, he would have. I mean, you know that, like, if roleplay had existed, he would not have done anything done.
I think it's true. I think he's a real world builder at heart, and if he had the opportunity to like do all the nonsense that people do on this side of the GM screen to like prep games, like he would have enjoyed that.
Indeed. Have you read the People of Middle Earth. It's one of the more recent History of Middle Earth books. It has the single most boring chapter I've ever written, where Tolkien spends many, 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 many pages doing spreadsheets of elven reproduction, trying to work out.
Which book is this?
It's not. It's one of the most recent History of Middle Earth books. It was it's not based on. It's not. It's a post Tolkien. It's like Carl Hofstadter or something. I'll check the name.
Okay.
But there's a whole chapter there where Tolkien's trying to work out the correct reproduction rates for the elves as they're marching from the lake where they woke up over to the Undying Lands. It is fantastic. Like, I'm obsessed with this one topic. I will get it right.
Right.
No one cares.
Yes.
I mean, but yeah. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of people who will relate to the feeling that sometimes you get really, really deeply interested in it. And like, that's where like, you're not even going to be that interested in it. But like, hey, I wrote an equipment table and it really is very accurate to 12th century England. Like these would what the prices would be. And then you're like, I can't wait to make my players track 12 denominations, but like it's on a momentary obsession. It's satisfying for the writer. Yeah. What were you saying? Sorry.
No, to go back to Ben's question about the difficulty about fantasy. I mean, part of the thing when Tolkien wrote that fantasy was in a very, very, very different place.
Yes.
That the genre was not. I mean, there's the whole Pratchett line about Tolkien being the Mount Fuji of fantasy. He very much defined how fantasy would turn in the rest of the century and how popular it would become. When he wrote that, it would have been seen as fairy stories and some other small bits. So he was defending it as something for adults. I think that basically, I don't think fantasy is that hard to write because you're freed from basically all rules. You can just you can make anything up. There's you're not even bound by the laws of physics. Would be in science fiction or whatever. You can just go a wizard did it. But it's very hard to get the feel of it right. That's what Tolkien was so good at. He had all his wealth of academic knowledge and he could build this sense of history, of place, of realism, and then drop a dragon into it. Whereas if you just go, there's a dragon, it just feels like you've got a sock puppet or something. There's no weight to it. I mean, Tolkien could make you feel that there was a world out there.
Good. You go, Josh.
Sorry, Ben. These little lags in communication always make. I didn't mean to step on your toes. I'm sorry. I was just reminded. This is a very small anecdote, so I'm going to pass it back to you afterwards. But I'm reminded what the foreword to the line "The Witch in the Wardrobe" that Lewis wrote, and I looked it up since I was thinking about it. And this is about thinking about how fantasy and fairy stories. But in the foreword, Lewis writes, "My dear Lucy, I wrote this story for you. When I began it, I had not realized the girl would grow quicker than the books. As a result, you are too old for fairy tales. By the time it is printed and bound, you will be older still. But one day you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again." And I think that's a wonderful way to think about fantasy and and in children's literature, right? There's a point when I was a young person that I didn't want to read children. I was too old for YA books, but now it's I don't care. Whatever, I don't read a lot of YA, but I certainly would not be embarrassed to be caught on the train reading a good one. What are you saying, Ben?
So Tolkien also, in on fairy stories, he moves pretty rapidly between again, he called it fairy stories. We would definitely call it fantasy today. He moves between fantasy, myth, and even religion in that essay. With very little respect for the things that we would call boundaries between them today. Leaving aside the religion, which I just think will be too controversial to ask the question of. But would you two say that fantasy is a modern version of myth, or do you think that there is a boundary between what we call fantasy today and the Odyssey?
I think one thing that I think is that myths and like comic books and commedia to art are all like kind of the same thing. You know, it's like
Ooh.
the fun of reading a new comic book, and you're like, okay, when this one, Magneto is good, and he is the leader of the X-Men, and the second season of this show. It's like, I understand the trope, I understand the characters. Nobody needs to re-explain it to me. I don't need to go to the origin story. You're just kind of telling me what's different, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's an interesting thought experiment. And I think mythological writers would do that. They're like, okay, I need to make the time work. So like in this one, this guy is the king of Thebes, and like Aphrodite didn't really steal Helen. They created she created what's the word? An illusion. I forget, that a simulacrum of Helen. It wasn't really Helen. She got over here, and that was a myth writer writing myth, and like the play, like the I have these stock characters and I'm going to make them do stuff, and the fun is in the little changes. I think is true for a lot of contemporary work. I think fresh, new fantasy books are not really what we're talking about there when we're thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the sort of the sudden jolt into comedic art, because I've been reading a lot about that lately and trying to get my head around it as a concept. There's a great book on the pantomime life of Joseph Grimaldi, who was sort of the guy who defined the sort of brought the clown archetype to the fore, and because that whole thing has sort of been forgotten in modern culture, but you see it's, once you know about it, you see its fingerprints everywhere.
Yes.
But I think the big difference between sort of like fantasy as an art form today, or literature form today, and myth is that like the novel is very much concerned with like explaining and contextualizing character and like, the internal life of the characters, whereas myths, they're much more about their deeds, and you don't have this. There are archetypal natures. Like I just watched The Odyssey there last night, so obviously it's sort of like
No spoilers.
Of a mind.
It's a 2,000-year-old book.
But that's the thing. I mean, Christopher Nolan does try and put a sort of modern spin on these characters, and like a lot of it is concerned with Odysseus's internal angst and post-traumatic like post the trauma of the Trojan War and so forth, where the original myths wouldn't have thought about it the same way. And it's interesting going back to to like not just like Tolkien is really on the cusp of this, because like you go back to older fantasy like William Morris's House of Wolflings and so forth, and that's much more like the older myths. It's basically an attempt to basically write a modern myth, in that you have these characters like doing heroic deeds and so forth, but we don't have the same insight of their characters. Whereas Tolkien takes these hobbits who are basically like modern day people, and sort of I'm going to put them into a world of myth and have them go off and explore it. Yes. And we do get a bit of the internal life of say Aragorn and so forth in the few chapters we have this perspective, but for the most part we're seeing the hobbits. Well, that means the Silmarillion is just pure myth, and Lord of the Rings is the first fantasy novel.
Yeah, and I wonder how different it would have been if he had achieved his goals of bundling them together as the one big book. Like I wonder how our would it have been as successful if the Silmarillion wasn't something that sickos read? If it just came part and parcel with it.
I mean, have you read his attempt to rewrite The Hobbit?
No, I never have. I mean, I have Jack Ratcliffe's History of the Hobbit
Yeah.
behind me, but I haven't read the attempt to read it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. There are only a few bits of talk where he's supposed to say, like, no, that's wrong. And one is that, and the other one is the last chapter of Lord of the Rings, which is the one he cut, which is abominable. But because he like, if we're going with this whole, like, sort of myth, fairy tale, fantasy novel thing, The Hobbit is very much fairy tale for the most part. And like, it's lovely that he was able to do all three. And I think any one of them would have been weakened if he tried to, like, sort of cram them all into the same style. Because he really hit on Lord of the Rings by accident. It was a fascinating like evolution in fantasy genre. Just like he sort of by happenstance happened to write this wonderful novel, which started out as like a by the numbers Hobbit sequel, and then took this wonderfully strange turn.
Yeah, I agree, and I have thought about how I could write advice as a blog post of like how one might run a Tolkien-esque game and what that means. And in the same way that you were talking that like Tolkien games are different things to different people. I mean, I think Tolkien's writing, not through the strength of his authorship, but by happy accident and maybe lack of editorial control, did like these wild tonal shifts that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Where the language becomes very elevated. In the Long Expected Party, they make a reference to a freight train, which I don't think that the Tolkien that was writing the Battle of Pelennor Fields would have done.
No.
He wouldn't have reached for that word. And so like
Ron, hit like a nuke.
How can I give good advice on running a game or game mastering a game as Tolkien would if he himself is so inconsistent, unless like that's like one of the freedoms that you allow yourself. You can sometimes use elevated language when it feels appropriate, and you can also make comparisons that your audience will understand, but the writing I was really struck by that in my most recent read through, which I just talking about, is that that shift at like when Mary, and I think it's around when Mary, I always put it right when you first find the Rohirrim and they find the three runners. That's when I feel like the thing took away from, like, he didn't know where it was going either. Like, I mean, not that he ever did, he was always writing, experimenting and rewriting.
But actually, that's the point where, for the first time, we've no hobbits on the picture. Like, up until that point, he's always writing from a hobbit point of view, and then he gets to that chapter and goes, "Hang on, like, now I'm just writing from Aragorn's point of view," and suddenly, like, he can, like, really lean into the whole heroic Anglo-Saxon stuff and go, I can do a Beowulf now. Come me.
Totally. Yeah, and I think you feel that you feel that shift. But yeah, he did a lot of things, and you're right. I agree with your premise that he wrote it all. I mean, the first fantasy novel by accident. Like, he didn't. He was set out to write a sequel to The Hobbit, and then a fantasy novel, and genre defining it.
Yeah. On writing advice for GMs, it's very difficult because, like, I do like fantasy novels as well. When you got like the time to sit down and do a novel, you can sort of like carefully sculpt the language. And GMing is so much in the heat of the moment. Like, to sort of loop back to the Saruman book, there's a section in there on playing Saruman and trying to help GMs run an NPC who has this immense sort of pre-packaged psychic weight. Because, like, it's one thing to, like, bring in, there's this bad guy and he is, like, Lord Dark, and he is a very scary space warrior. And then you say, okay, and then you meet Darth Vader. Because just by saying Darth Vader, you're bringing in all the weight of the movie, like, the sort of the cultural mass of it. And similarly with like middle stuff, like, part of the joy of doing middle is being able to meet these characters from the books,
Mhm.
but the players come in there with all their their preconceptions and their existing knowledge of those characters, and you've got a GM who's now trying to play Christopher Lee playing Saruman on the fly. And
some of your writing in Hands of the White Wizard is so evocative, and it really, I think, helps put people into the perspective of Saruman. It's like, I don't have the page in front of me, but then you know that what I'm talking about, where it's like that you've like it's fairly terse and it's fairly small, but it's like everything is like there's about to be a world war and you're about to lose. You are Saruman. Everything is on your shoulders. Like, you're the only one that can save everybody. And that's a great way to like frame that character to forefront him in the story for the GM.
Yeah, and also it gives the GM something to sort of hang on to a bit. Like, here's what I'm trying to do here. Actually, I was reading some stuff about dungeons from the dungeon design course, and there's a lot of sort of I'm miserably here, but sort of breaking down the description and having here are the stuff, the various senses, the various things the GM needs to know at various points. And do you think there's a tension between presenting information in a very digestible, here's here's the first thing, here's the second thing, here's the third thing, here's the script elements, and the sort of writing that can excite and this sort of heightened prose that can inspire GMs, because I've when I was doing Moria, I was very conscious that I want stuff to be useful at the table, but I was also trying to go it's not just about the sound of bats over there. I want to convey the emotion of this lost city, fall into darkness, and so forth. There's the tension between usability and human prose, and
Yeah, no, those are real tensions, and I think those are things that all RPG writers are trying to, all writers of technical work are trying to put things in the right place so that the tensions hold against each other. And it is hard, and you're never going to solve the problem for everybody. But I'm thinking very much in my publications about where do I reveal what thing in what order, and how much do we need there to work well for the different, because you could have one person, and it's not the person that wants small scale things and big scale things and world changing things. It's the person that has to see the book on the shelf and think oh, that looks kind of interesting, what's that about? It's the person that is yes, I'm gonna buy it. It's the person that is okay, I have 100 books on my shelf and I'm gonna run this one next. It's the person that's reading it for the first time. It's the person who's at the table trying to find the thing that he knows he fucking saw a second ago and where did it go? It that person's the same person, and I have to write for all of those guys. And it's hard, but it's one of those things that you're always thinking about as you're making the choices of all right, this is going to be a header, this is going to be bolded, I'm not going to bold this thing, I'm going to put a flavor quote at the top to it's just those are the sorts of things I'm thinking about. And so I don't really have an answer. Not that not that I think you asked a specific question. It's just you have to grapple with all of that stuff.
Yeah, it is the fantastic tension of role playing games that they're both works of prose but also functional. When I do my novels, I find role playing games much easier than doing novels, because novels can be anything, but a game has to be usable at the table. And while you can try and elevate both of them, the game has this tension, this restriction, there's a shape it has to take to be usable at the table. Oh, that said, I love the games are sort of exploring that space. Like I'm currently running Mythic Bastion Land, which is I'm amazed by how much content there is in such a small book. And part of the way it does that is just by being remarkably, I'm not sure if callous is the right word, but it's very much a sink or swim. It's like, yes, here's the rule. I'm not going to explain the rule. I'm not going to reference the rule again. But like, if you're playing this game properly, he was like, here's how combat works. That's it. We'll never mention combat again. Everything's like that. Here is this like wonderfully evocative night. I'm not going to tell you how to use that. I'm not going to I'm going to let everything just be discovered in play. And I'm not sure if you could approach Middle Earth the same way, although it'd be lovely to passing experiment to try to sort of just be like, go, we should pull these facts out there and let you deal with them.
Oh yeah, I mean that's there's a lot of people that I like their books very much, and I've got to enjoy a whole campaign of Mythic Bastion Land. But I know I'm never going to write like Chris McDowell. I know that I'm never going to like I can't try to write like him. Yeah, he has a real terseness. But also like the counterpoint to that is he also posts a lot of examples on his blog and his Patreon to support that stuff, the stuff that doesn't get into print, but like he wants people to be able to access and get a fuller picture of like what's in his head. But I think I enjoyed playing Mythic Bastion Land. I think it would be kind of outside my GM's strong skill set to be able to translate some of the way the myths unfold. Like, that would not be my forte, and that's just like a weakness in my jamming, not a weakness I don't think in the book.
Well, we're getting towards the end here. Gareth, you want to say one more thing, and then I'll let everybody plug their stuff, and we can go home?
Sure. No, I have been running it, and it sort of fits in with my sort of improvisational GM skills, but again, I've had great sessions. The campaign is a bit wobbly because making the various sessions line up has not been as successful as it could have been. But that's also because all my players are old now and we've missed a lot of sessions.
All right. Well, Gareth, what do you have up for sale right now? And do you have any crowdfunding campaigns in your future?
How subtle that was. Launching... Actually, we should have talked more about hobbits, but anyway. Or halflings, as they're legally distinct fashion. Launch tomorrow is Mary Shard Detective Club, which is my game of halfling murder mysteries. So basically it's Agatha Christie in the legally distinct writing. You're playing a bunch of amateur detectives in this cozy little English countryside with halflings and dwarves and boggarts and puka, and you solve crimes. And also out fairly soon is my next novel, which is the Dungeon Book, which is, as the name suggests, Kipling's Jungle Book in a D&D dungeon.
Oh, cool.
When is that coming out?
August 11th.
Like hard copies?
Oh yeah, it's out more, but so it'll be in everywhere.
Holy cow. That sounds...
Congratulations on the release. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
That sounds really good. Okay, hey, can Josh and I get advanced reader copies, or is it too late?
I could probably get copies out to you. We'll sort that out.
Okay. I'm like, that's soon. Let's push Gareth on. Let's see what we can get. So Josh, go ahead and tell us all about His Majesty the Word, and I assume the Castle Automatic.
Well, first of all, thanks very much, Gareth, for talking with me today and reaching out, and Ben for indulging me and letting me come back on your show. But yeah, I have a dungeon for His Majesty the Worm coming out soon. I think it is technically still in pre-order, but that is a generous use of that term. But you can order it. It is called the Castle Automatic. It is over 100 rooms, 5 levels, and new rules and new monsters and all sorts of cool stuff if you like to explore big old dungeons.
Awesome. Well, in closing, I would just say to listeners, do not comment on this video. It is totally forbidden. I have set up this channel so that only good-looking people with elegant personalities and high IQs can see the subscribe button. And most of you are not going to make the cut, so just don't bother looking below this video. You're just going to be depressed when you fail to see the subscribe button. And do not tell anyone about this video ever. It is a secret teaching and therefore not to be shared with commoners. So with that warning spewed out into the ether, I feel comfortable ending this conversation and saying, go forth to love and serve Eru Iluvatar, right?
Yep.
Well, seriously though, Gareth, Josh, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you.